Hello. Hi, I'm Shreyas Laddha from the Kansas Star. I cover all things KU basketball and football for the Star, and I'm here with Robert Kuwada of the Fresno Bee. He covers Fresno State, and we're here to talk about the big game tomorrow. There's a lot of excitement building up for that, and I guess the first question I have for you, Robert, is how are things in the Fresno State side? Is the fan base excited? How do people feel about the season? And just how are things going overall?
Well, I think the fan base is excited. They got a lot of momentum going for the past few years, and football program is back on a good track. So, yeah, I think everybody's a little curious to see what they're going to get with his team and his coaching staff. But yeah, it should be an interesting year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of hype on the Kansas side just because it's a newly renovated David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium. Kansas has spent over $400 million renovating basically half the stadium, the north and the west side. And there's been a lot of really cool renovations and concessions that are new to this stadium. I think there's a lot of excitement that, Kansas come in, start off on a good foot against a good opponent like Fresno State. Typically, Kansas is playing the Cupcakes week one, but Fresno State's a great team. They finished fourth in the Mountain West last year. And, the expectations for you, like, what do you feel are looking like for the way they look this year?
I think I have them around 6-6, 7-5, just because of the lack of experience at a lot of positions on the field. I do have a lot of confidence just watching the staff and the coordinators through fall camp and practice here the past couple weeks. I think they'll be able to elevate the team a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so many questions with these guys right now. Offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, receivers, quarterback. I think Matt Ent's coach, the other day said, we really need to go play somebody to see where we're at. And I mean, they really do. I mean, this game on Saturday will tell them a lot about who they are and where they can get to.
100%. You guys have Fresno State has a new coach in Matt Entz. He has a pretty prestigious past, winning multiple championships with, I think, North Dakota State. Can you tell me a little bit about him and what he brings to the program?
I think he brings a mindset, a mentality, a specific way of playing football. Obviously, North Dakota State, he had a lot of success up there with running the football and playing good defense. And, that's what he wants to do here. I think there's a little bit of a question just in that transition period because it's not something Fresno State has been used to recently. The past 3 years, they've really struggled to run the ball at all. So it'll be an interesting transition. Personnel wise, how do they fit into what he wants to do? I think there'll be some growing pains. I think if you want to dominate the line of scrimmage and control games that way, it takes a certain physicality and mentality. And I don't think that's something that you can just flip a switch on. So I'm really curious to see how well they do there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Kansas is kind of similar with Fresno State where there's a lot of question marks. Kansas has pretty much a brand new team, it feels like, outside of returning quarterback Jalen Daniels and returning running back Daniel Highshaw. They brought in over 20-plus transfers to the program. They have multiple starters who left the program, I think 15-plus last year, and 30 players graduated. So there's a lot of question marks on what is going to really happen on both ends. And I think, there's excitement that they can hopefully build upon the end of last season when they went on that 3-game winning streak, I think, and they beat 3 ranked opponents. But, it was a disappointing year last year for Kansas. If you're a Jayhawks fan, there's a lot of expectations. You go 5-7, lose a lot of, I think, tough, one-score games in heartbreaking fashion. And it was a down year after I think there was a lot of hype building that they could be a Big 12 contender. I think maybe this year is not quite that high with the hype, but there's a chance that I think Kansas can make a bowl game and it'd be the third in the landslide bowl era. And I think a big part of that is the quarterback battle. I mean, Fresno State has a veteran quarterback in AJ Warner. He's played around a lot of different schools. What does he bring to the program?
I think he brings experience. I mean, you look at the fall camp and going back to spring, they've had 3 guys pretty much competing the whole time, which is pretty rare anywhere in college football, right? I mean, the old adage is, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. These guys actually had three. So, they had a lot to work through. I think EJ kind of separated himself toward the end there. I think that experience that he has gave him a pretty good advantage, and he took advantage of it. So, you can look at the success he's had and say, it was Rice and it was Temple. Those are not two premier college football programs. So maybe his numbers are not what they could be. And again, like I said, I think the offensive coordinator, Josh Davis, will do a really good job of playing to his strengths and keeping him on a good path and getting things done. So I think he could have a pretty solid year. I think, his past is a little questionable, obviously. His touchdown percentage isn't high. His passing efficiency rating isn't high. He's thrown a lot of interceptions. His record as a starter, not very good. But, there are a lot of factors that go into that, obviously. So I do think he has a chance here to surprise people off of that.
Yeah, 100%. And, on the flip side of things, you have Kansas quarterback Jalen Daniels. He's a sixth-year guy. He's had a tumultuous career at Kansas, some really high highs in 2022 when he was Heisman contention, and some really low lows. When he missed basically most of the 2023 season because of a back surgery, only played 3 games, got the medical red shirt. Last year was a pretty bumpy road. He started off pretty rough. I think there were some calls to maybe bench him from the fan base at points last year, but he really rebounded in the second half of last year when he kind of got back to his old self. Now he goes in with NFL aspirations and dreams of playing beyond college football. But, if you're a Kansas fan, you're asking which version of Jalen Daniels shows up on Saturday and beyond, right? Is it the one that showed up in the second half of last season, or was it the one that showed up in the first half of last season? And at least so far, through fall camp and kind of training, spring ball, et cetera, the reviews from the coaching staff and players around him have been really, really good. They've talked about his demeanor being super locked in, focused, a different kind of aura is the word they've used. And I think there's a lot of expectations that, if there's an idea that Kansas can go and make a bowl game and win a bowl game, a lot of that hinges on how well he plays. And I'm excited to kind of see that battle in place tomorrow. And I kind of just building off of that, is there anything, as a Fresno State, expert that you're looking forward to or most excited about with the new Kansas renovated stadium?
The stadium? Oh, I thought we were going to talk about Daniels a little bit because I think he's a fascinating element to this game as well. How Kansas uses him and how Fresno State tries to defend him. But, the stadium, great thing for Kansas, obviously. And I know, Fresno State wants to try and do the same thing and either, renovate their existing stadium or build a new. And I'm sure everybody on that airplane is going to get there and learn some things about how this gets done, what it looks like. And hopefully they can bring some knowledge back and get something done here because it's badly needed.
Absolutely. And just going back to what you were saying about Jalen Daniels, when you watched his tape or kind of seen him play, what kind of sticks out to you? And is he the type of quarterback that can give Fresno State problems?
Fresno State has actually had a lot of success with similar quarterbacks in the past. This is a completely different defensive staff. Not completely, but pretty much a new defensive staff. And I think it depends on what Kansas tries to do with Jalen Daniels, right? What are his strengths and what are they going to try and use? Obviously he's a tremendous athlete. He can throw the ball. He can run it. He's dangerous in a lot of ways. So what do you try and take away from him? That's to me, that's a number one thing I'm going to be watching tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And with EJ Warner and everything he brings, do you hope and expect, I guess, his dad to be in the stands, Kurt Warner?
I would think he would be there. Yeah. mean, I don't know why he wouldn't be. Maybe, I don't know, he could be working or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I would think he would be there though. It's it's a good start for him, fresh start for him, and he has an opportunity here. I think there's probably a better team around him than he has had in the past. So yeah, I would think there's a lot of excitement in the Warner family right now.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting because KU secondary is so young. They have Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson left for the NFL. And those are guys who are making all Big 12 teams for consecutive years, right? And now they have guys like Jahil Hurley, Jalen Todd, who are young players, but with young players, you get growing pains. They're not going to be all Big 12 level players right away. And I think that's one of the biggest things when I look at this Kansas team is how good is the secondary going to be? Because last year and the years before that, there'd be games where Kobe Bryant or Melo Dotson would make a game-changing pick six or a game-changing play. Those game changers could be there on this team, but are they going to be that right away? I don't think so. And I think there's a real opportunity here for EJ Warner to kind of pick apart everything that's happening with this secondary. Because if they're young, you have no idea how they're going to react to certain wide receiver types, certain routes that are being run. And these guys didn't play a ton of snaps last year. They're now all being asked to kind of, Jalen Todd, Jahil Hurley, Austin Alexander to play significant snaps or start for Kansas.
Yeah, and that's one thing that EJ Warner is going to excel at over anybody on Fresno State's roster. I mean, he's seen enough football. He's going to be able to know when they're misaligned, or he's going to have the right matchups. He's going to know where to go with the ball. Fresno State does have a little bit of an issue like Kansas in the secondary. Its receiver core is pretty young. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of snaps played there. They do have some pretty good guys out there. But again, I mean, not a lot of football, not a lot of time with Warner. It's not like they've played together for 2 or 3 years or anything. So, yeah, it could get interesting back there.
No, absolutely. And kind of going into, with the offense as a whole, is there another player outside of Warner that Kansas fans should kind of keep an eye on being a game changer for Fresno State?
I would look at 2 running backs, Bryson Donaldson and Rayshon Luke. I think they're different players, but they both have game-breaking ability. I think if you look at the passing game, I think the tight ends are going to be more involved this year than they have been the past couple of years. And they do have some really big, athletic, talented guys out there as well. So, but if I was going to watch some guys on offense, I would watch Donaldson, Luke, and Warner. And also, you're going to have a true freshman starting at left tackle, which that might be worth the price of admission alone, just watching to see how he does and how Kansas, goes at him. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch.
I'm fascinated for that battle because Kansas has a defensive lineman in Just Finkley who comes from Texas, and he's been raved about all camp and how he can get a quarterback, stop the running game. He's a bigger player, a bigger guy, and I think, Kansas is going to do everything in their power to kind of, test the left tackle. Like if this is a young left tackle being put out there against some veteran defensive linemen, Leroy Harris is another player to watch. He's been raved about throughout fall camp, training camp. He's the player that I think outside of Emmanuel Henderson Jr., the Alabama transfer wide receiver, was most talked about, I think, in the last couple of weeks. Harris went from being a potential redshirt option coming in from an FCS school in Division II to now being a guy who could play legitimate snaps for Kansas on the defensive line, and a guy who could be, the next line of Kansas players that have come in through the transfer portal and, kind of grown their draft stock. I mean, 2 years ago, Austin Booker came to Kansas. He had a great year, and now he's, getting 3 sacks in preseason games for the Chicago Bears. So, Kansas has done a really good job of identifying, I think, defensive linemen, defensive edges that could be, underrated talent for some other teams, and they play great, and then they get, drafted. Lonnie Phelps is another guy who was similar to that, and I think that's the one thing I'm paying attention to, right? Like the line play on both sides is fascinating. And kind of go into that, what is the defensive line like for Fresno State?
They have some good guys on the edge, some good guys inside. Again, there's not a lot of snaps played. The two guys playing inside, both power forward transfers that haven't played a lot of football, but big physical guys. Off the edge, there's another power forward transfer from SC. They've got a guy, Finn Claypool, who will be interesting. He was at Drake and had racked up some huge stats. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of translate to this level. But yeah, you think about this game tomorrow and what you said about Kansas's defensive front. I mean, Fresno State, this is the way they want to play, right? And they're going to be tested right off the bat. So, man, yeah, I wasn't aware of some of those defensive guys, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see because they don't have a lot of experience on the offensive line. Their best guy is a center who played left tackle last year. They moved him inside where he fits better physically. He's played the most football, but obviously, you got the true freshman out here. You got a fifth-year senior who hasn't played a lot at the right tackle. The two guards, they both played some last year, but don't have a ton of experience. So, it sounds like they're really going to be put to a test. And, I mean, this is the way Fresno State wants to play. So, let's see.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be really interesting because Kansas offense, I think they have between Daniel Highshaw and Jalen Daniels, both sixth-year guys. I think they're like the oldest or one of the oldest returning duos in college football. They've been with Kansas the entire time. And, Highshaw is a really interesting running back because he was kind of a power back. He was, the fire to Devin Neal's ice is what a lot of people will call him. And he had shown flashes, I think, early in his career being better than, former Kansas legend Devin Neal, who's now with the New Orleans Saints. But he just never really stayed healthy. I think that was always the issue with him. And I think he's gotten back to full strength and being fully healthy. And between him and Iowa transfer LaShawn Williams, I think Kansas will rely on the run game just to open up the pass game for Jalen Daniels. I think it'll be really interesting to see what the balance is like because, Kansas has a new offensive coordinator and Coach Jim Zabrowski. He did coach one game, I think a couple years back, Kansas versus UNLV in the bowl game. And his bag of tricks was crazy. There was a lot of trick plays. There was a lot going on. And I had a former Kansas player tell me, when Jeff Grimes left Wisconsin and he got elevated from, basically co-offensive coordinator, QB coach to offensive coordinator, he was like, everyone in the program was like, why didn't this happen earlier? Why didn't they promote him internally? Because he has rapport with Jalen Daniels. This will be their fifth year together. He's well liked within the program, and he's a little zany with some of his plays. And I think one of the coolest things about it is a lot of Kansas players in the past have been able to create their own plays with him. Tight ends, etc. I'm really intrigued to kind of see how KU's offense matches up because I think the biggest strength KU has in this game is their offense. They have four tight ends that can be used in a lot of different ways. Deshaun Hanukkah can be the security blanket, I think, that Jalen Daniels has lacked in the last couple of years. Broden Groen from Rice, a transfer. He was actually, I think, played with E.J. Warner back at Rice, which is pretty cool. And I think it's so interesting to me because I think they will test this defensive line for Fresno State, but also I'm wondering how KU's new look wide receiver room is going to do against Fresno State secondary. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
I'm sorry, the secondary?
Yeah, Fresno State secondary.
Yeah. I mean, that's going into the season, that's probably the strength of that defense. They have a lot of experience back there. They got safety Cam Brock, who's coming back from an injury, but a very smart, heady player. Their corners are, one of them's all preseason, all conference. That's Azilian Hamilton, Jakari Embry. They got probably their best group is the secondary. So, Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Like I said, I think a lot plays off how Kansas wants to use Daniels, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting matchup.
I'm very excited to see that matchup because this Kansas wide receiver room is completely brand new. They brought in Emmanuel Henderson from Alabama. The hype around him has been as much hype as I've seen in my 3 seasons of covering Kansas football. He came in, December, and it feels like they've just not stopped talking about him since. He's an absolute burner, one of the fastest players on the team. I think he broke the speed record from former Kansas backup quarterback Jason Beam, who was very quick, who now plays in the NFL, practice squad for the Indianapolis Colts. Another guy, Cam Pickett, who's going to be a slot receiver. He's not maybe exactly Luke Grimm, what he was for Kansas last year, but he has great hands. He can go out there and make some tough catches. But we have no idea, right? Like, it's training camp. They talk about it, we hype about it, and everyone's in the best shape of their lives. They've gained or lost 15 pounds, depending on who they are. And, this is why we play the games, is to figure out how good these teams are, because I think the floor of this wide receiver room is lower than the last couple of years because, Jalen Daniels had 3 guys who were with him for multiple years. And now the ceiling could be even higher because, no disrespect to those guys, but they weren't like 4 or 5 star prospects. I mean, Emmanuel Henderson is a good player. He just didn't get playing time at arguably one of the best teams in the country in Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Fresno State has a little connection at Alabama, so they probably know all about that guy right now.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the matchup I'm most excited to watch is just the 2 quarterbacks battling it out, because I think KU secondary might be in for a little bit of a tumble back and forth, just because veteran quarterbacks, they just have tricks up their sleeve that young secondaries can get fooled by. And I think on the flip side, Jalen Daniels, if he is not careful with Fresno State having such a strong secondary, he could throw a pick or 2, and that's the stuff that changes games that are, close and winnable into losing games.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. There's probably not very many matchups where you're going to see a 6th-year guy and a 5th-year guy going at it, So, yeah, interesting chess match for both those guys and both those coordinators, and yeah, it should be a pretty fun game.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. And we had a viewer question, wonder if there's a group outside of the secondary that Kansas fans should be afraid of, in a sense.
Afraid of?
Worried about is probably a better word there.
Worried about? I would man, somebody asked me this question the other day, and it's one of those things where they got a lot of things that they can go to, but there's so many questions everywhere. It's not like they've identified any strengths or had any weaknesses exposed. We're all going to find out on Saturday, what the answer to that question, I think. Because, they've been knocking each other's heads together for the past, month and a half. And, we'll see. They need to play somebody else and see what it looks like.
Yeah, I completely get that. I feel like with both these teams, with the way they've had the roster turnover and just the guys that have transferred in and transferred out, it feels like a blank canvas almost, in a sense of like their season starts tomorrow, and it's their ability to write it off on the right or wrong foot depending on how they play. Do you expect this to be a competitive game? I know Kansas is 12.5-point favorites, but I'm not sure, if that is too high or too little. I've been debating that with friends of I think this could be a 10-point game going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was actually surprised by 12, and I saw 13 at one point a while back. That surprised me, but I also know I haven't seen a lot of Kansas football the last couple of years, and obviously the memories before that, not really great for Kansas. So my judgment could be a little clouded there by some by some history. It's I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I'll put it that way. Yeah, I think it'd be a very competitive game. Just because I don't know that Kansas. I think Kansas is ahead of them, but I don't know that they're way ahead of them. I mean, Fresno State has beaten Power 4 teams the past few years, and I don't know that Kansas is beyond their reach. I think they're well within their wheelhouse. I mean, Fresno State's obviously very young, and that could be exposed on Saturday. But just looking at the two teams and what they've done recently, I was surprised by 13 or 12.
I completely get it. I think, as somebody who's covered Kansas for the last couple of years, it's hard to know what to expect because I thought last year was going to be an 11-1 year, and then they go 5-7, and I look like I have egg on my face. So, sometimes it's in this business, it's, sometimes you're very right and sometimes you're very wrong. And kind of going along with that, I think my prediction was 31-17. I think it's going to be a 10-score game within 10 points, really, in the fourth quarter. But Kansas pulls away a little bit at the end. But what about you? Where do you think this game ends up?
I thought the same way. I thought a late score would put Kansas out of reach, and probably over 12. Now that I put it that way, but I do think I think it'll be close early because the two teams will keep it close early, trying to figure each other out and figure themselves out to a certain extent. But again, I just Daniels and his experience with his players and his coordinator, Fresno State doesn't have that, right? So I think Kansas is probably a little bit ahead of where Fresno State is right now, and that gives them pretty significant edge in a week 0 game.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of juice around this game for Kansas. You can't lose a game in a renovated stadium where you poured $400 million to finish half of it.
Exactly.
There's a lot of really cool things about that stadium, the waving the wheat in the end zone and, the lights that kind of showcase almost like the cornfields, et cetera, look. But, they have to win. I mean, not to say there's a must win in week 1, but, I mean, it deflates a lot of hope and hype around this program if you go out and lose, especially in heartbreaking fashion, because it's a sellout.
Exactly.
You hope the game is not in the favor of Fresno State, but I do think it'll be competitive, and I do think it'll be a fun game to watch.
Yeah. It'd be bad if the air went out of the balloon in the first game. But yeah, Fresno State to me right now is almost a mystery. I mean, I've been pretty good at predicting their win totals the past few years, but they've made it pretty easy because you can look at what they have. They usually have a lot of returning players, established quarterback. The schedule in the Mountain West is not overly difficult. Mm-hmm. So it has been pretty easy to peg where they are. But this team this year with the new staff and a lot of turnover, I can't wait to see what it looks like.
Absolutely. And thanks for joining me, Robert. It was a pleasure talking to you. A lot of fun just talking football. I know we've done a lot of talking. I think it's ready for game time to start. I think it's been a lot of previews, a lot of hype building up to this game and the season for both sides. Appreciate you joining me. Appreciate everyone who's listened and watched this live stream for us. And want to remind everybody that you can kind of read and listen and watch the live stream on both the Kansas City Star and the Fresno Bee websites, and all our coverage is there to kind of get you ready for tomorrow, 5:30. Should be a fun one.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.